Welcome to Headlines. This is David Lichtenstein, and this week we have a very interesting, contemporary, both a halacha and hashkafa discussion. We're going to have a debate with Satmar, the Eidah Chredis, the supporters of Rabbi Shmuel Bach, perhaps some brisk as well. It's perhaps the brisk Shita as well. And I call it a debate, but we tag it a debate, but it's not really a debate. I think it's more of a discussion. We see the marches at Barclays Stadium, boys laying down in the street, stopping traffic. We see the antithesis, the antipathy, the dislike of the Zionist quote unquote state, and many people don't understand either the halacha or the hashkafa of it. So the people who are clearly proponents of it, such as we'll begin with Satmar, because Satmar is, we would say, agreed that the Divrei Yoel, that he wrote Alagula, Valatzmur, the late Satmar Rebbe, clearly was the leading archetype of this shita. And we know many Satmar, and we say they're makbid on mitzvahs, shmiras ha-mitzvahs, and so these are clearly anashim who are sincere, yireim, shleimim. So rather than just say not understand it, let's make it a deep dive into understanding what do they really believe. So we will have for the side of Rav Steinman, which is really the more classic in Israel, I would say, the vast majority of the Haredim would, follow his path. We will have Rabbi Eisenstein, who's against the protests, against protesting, against making, these marches, stopping traffic, etc. He's a confidant. He's a right-hand man of Rabbi Steinman, who is the leader of the Litvish world. And we will have somebody to represent a proponent of the Satmar ideology, Rabbi Yitzchak Brown, who is a truly a sincere Yerei Shemayim, Talmud Chacham, really an Adam Mashalim, a person of eminently respectable and worth of our admiration, as lives of an incredibly sincere and holy lifestyle. And we will ask him to explain the Satmar opinion. Now, this is a very sensitive topic that we're discussing this week, and I get a lot of pushback. So here's a voicemail of somebody we had who was very upset that I asked the question of, should we be Makar Tov to the Israeli soldiers who are Moisa Nefesh protecting our borders? I mean, if it would have been Raoul Wallenberg who saved us from many Jews from Nazis, or pick your, if it's an American soldier or a UN soldier, if it's an Israeli soldier, he happens to be Jewish, and he's protecting you from basically today's iteration of Nazis, which are the very bloodthirsty Arabs that surround Israel, should there be? And I asked that question. Here's the response that somebody sent me by voicemail.
Hi, I wanted to say about the nonsense and the bizayin tamalachom and the shtusim v'avolim and the days koizes that you said this week about the matzav in Eretz Yisroel. I don't want to say anything about it because I don't consider you or your shtusim enough to even bavar or even talk about, because everything I say won't be enough. I just want to say one thing, that don't think that because only a few people will call in and give and respond on your nonsense, don't think that means that only a few people care about this. I'm sure there's hundreds of thousands of people that are going to be fuming, and they're going to care about the bizayin Torah of some Turkish ox-fed like you being revazed Torah, which is what you said. But I just want to tell you that most people are going to believe this, not to even waste their time to call up and say they're there, because it's so push-it, and it's just a waste of time, and it's like showing that you're in a tzad mavarn. That's where they're not going to call up. I just want to make sure you know that. Thank you.
Now, from his response, I think we could say, doesn't sound like he agrees with me 100%. Right, but these are the types of feelings that we get, and I think it's fair to honor them by playing those who disagree with me. Interestingly, we will hear from Aaron Leib's spokesperson, who does say at some level, yes, we should record time, and Reb Chaim Shmulevitz certainly held that way. But it's just a question certainly worth discussing. Next week we will have, I don't know if it's next week, sometimes we skip, but we do have another leading Satmar proponent of the ideology, somebody in fact who arranges a lot of these meetings and protests, and who has met with both Reb David Soloveitchik. He will list you a list of the people he's met with, and we'll ask him to explain it as well. So you will have two different proponents to explain the Satmar opinion. And here, before, by the way, since this is a halacha program, I will give the halachic basis of the Satmar Rebbe Shita, and those who disagree with him. But neither of the Satmar proponents really wanted to go into it from halacha. They wanted to talk a bit from hashkafa, so I will do it on myself. I will give that introduction. I would like to add that all our shows will now be on Yeshiva World News. It'll be an additional outlet as started playing our weekly programs, and I think you would enjoy it there. Now, here are some of the questions that I would like you, the audience, to see. And this is what always mystified me. I'm going to ask him, assuming the Satmar Rebbe was right, and the Zionist state, which only at its inception, Herzl and many of those were true apikosim, but assuming the Zionist state is evil, so what do we do now? Do we just give it back to the Arabs, and do we take in like an Arab, we call back King Hussein, or is it the fellow from Syria, Assad? I mean, do we want Ahmadinejad? Like, which one? Sisi from Egypt, the head of Libya? What would you like Israel to look like today? You had a magic wand, you gave it to the Satmar Rebbe and said, okay, what would you do today? It mystifies me. I'd like to hear their response to this. Additionally, here's another question. Is today's Zionism the Zionism of Herzl and Ben Gurion and Echad Am? I mean, they say over a story that Rabbi Amram Bloi was looking, there's a Rechov Echad Am in Yerushalayim, and he had to go there, so he stopped the stranger and he said, Eifo Rechov Echad Am Yamach Shemai. And the guy looked at him, there's no such a street. He couldn't utter the Zionist word without Yamach, because many of them, notwithstanding that do we or do we not use such an aphorism for a Jew, many of them were truly apikosim who wanted to be Oike Yiddishkeit. The Chavetz Chaim says about the Yesevnikists that they were Amalek. But is today's Zionism the same thing? I mean, do the Israeli leaders today, are they anti-religion? Last year, there were $2.3 billion given to yeshivas Tailim. That means that the Israeli government is the biggest supporter of Torah in history. They give annually more than Mr. Reichman, who is truly the greatest supporter that we'll ever see in our lifetimes of yeshivas, maybe gave in his life. Astonishing. So would they say that about that too? And here's another question. So has Zionism changed? I mean, are they really true Zionists anymore, or is it just about, look, we have to live here, let's defend our borders? And here's another question. Looking at the incredible success of Torah in Israel, I mean, according to the last census, this is 2 years old, there are 108,390 boys in Kollel and Yeshiva. It's the most ever in history. The Kollel movement in Eretz Yisrael is bigger than it's been since the Churban Habayis. Fact. So when we look back, how do we rate a stock or a fund manager's ability? We say, look, you have this opinion on the stock, you have that opinion. You check afterwards. Well, it's 50 years later. I mean, Yerushalayim and Bnei Brak, would it be better if they weren't built? I mean, when anybody goes to Yerushalayim, does he say, oh my goodness? So looking back, was this Shita in fact wrong? The let's not have a state. We will ask him this question as well. Additionally, I want to ask them, after the Holocaust, I mean, the Holocaust showed nobody wanted us until we were dead, they wanted us. We'll talk about the St. Louis, the boat that went from port to port to port with 1,000 Jews on it. Saying, please, Cuba take us in, America take us in, Israel take us in. And everybody said, no, we don't want you. And they returned them to the gas chambers. Many of them died in the gas chambers. I don't know the amount, it was half of them. I mean, no, but don't we need some place to run? So how, Satmar Rebbe, can you explain this Shita? And then lastly, we will ask them, if you believe, like the Satmar Rebbe writes a number of times, that Zionism is Avodah Zarah, well, we know you're not allowed to be Neneh from Avodah Zarah. How do you stay in Israel? I mean, there are tens of thousands of, maybe hundreds, between the Eid HaChreidis and Satmar. And I say the Achredis and Satmar because the Satmar Rebbe was the Ravid or the Gaivid of Yerushalayim for the Eid HaChreidis. He was considered, right? So how do you say that halachically? These are the questions we will ask our Satmar representatives or the representatives of the Shita. And again, I would like to say that the people who are here are incredibly respectable, dignified people who live a lifestyle that is, I couldn't live much of their lifestyle. I mean, truly special people. So it's more of a discussion than a debate, a curiosity. What do you believe? They're intelligent, sane people. What do you believe? So maybe we will all be more intelligent after these next two programs. Before we begin, I would like to give you just a halachic background of this. And the Satmar Rebbe in his Sfarim Divrei Yoel and Alagula Valatzmura bases his shita on a Gemara in Ksubis. It's on Kuf Yud Aleph. We will post a plethora of Maramakayimis, you're welcome to see, where the Gemara basically brings a memra of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, who says that Hashem was made three promises, three shvuos. One, Shalayalu Yisroel b'chayma. And Rashi says that they would not go back to Eretz Yisrael biyad chazaka. Right? Well, that's a debate what it means, but the simple reading biyad chazaka means in force. The second one is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mashbiya klal Yisrael shalayimredu be'umais ha'olam, that they would not rebel against umais ha'olam. And the third shvua was he was mashbiya, this time the umais ha'olam of the world, the akum of the world, that they will not make our diaspora too painful. So the Satmar Rebbe says it's a shvua that God was mashbiya klal Yisrael not to return in force, and the entire premise of Zionism is to take Israel back with force, with an army, with the tzahal, what they call today, right? At the time it was maybe the Irgun tzahal, and he said this is against the shvua. Additionally, it's a rebellion against the Umay Sa'ilam. And it's based on this. Now, those who counter this, and there are many, there's much written about it, we'll give Mara Makaimis, we'll say something like, it's an Agadata Gemara. The Gemara is not brought, not by Rush, the first great Paisik, not by the Rif, the Rush, the Ran, the Rambam, the Rishainim, Ramban, Rajba, Ritva, Meiri, Rambam, the great codifier, doesn't bring it. Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it. So it's an Agadata Gemara. Do we paskin from Agadata? We know we don't paskin from an Agadata. I'll give you a few examples. We do so occasionally, but very carefully. Somebody asked Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He said the halacha is that, or rather the Gemara says, throw yourself into a fire before being mavazah chaveri barabim, before being mavayish somebody. We learn it from Tamar, who was willing to be thrown into a fire rather than embarrass Yehuda. So we said, well, since halach is you would have to kill yourself before embarrassing somebody, so you have a din, it has a din of ritzicha. If you see somebody about to embarrass somebody, is he a roidef? Is he a rodef? And therefore, since he's in effect, he's killing the other person by embarrassing him, would you be allowed to shoot? And the implications of this are, the next time you go to a Shabbos, well, not a Shabbos meal, but a Sheva Brachas, and they're going to roast the chassan, or somebody's going to say something inappropriate, bring a knife along. Or if you're a Muslim, bring a suicide vest along. So, would you be allowed to do that? And Rav Shlomo Zalman laughed. He said, of course you can't do that. It's an Agadata Gemara. Can't make a person a roidef. There's a Gemara that discusses whether the Leviathan could drown the world, the two frolicking Leviathans drown the world with their playing. Now, could you imagine a Rav getting up in Shul and saying, since the Leviathan could, doing what Harvey does, basically drown the world, and we know that there's a mitzvah of shmartem es nafshei seichem, it's incumbent upon every family to have a rowboat docked at their front door for should this occasion occur. There's a Gemara in Gittin that talks about how there's one mountain in Yerushalayim that if you do the math had something like 4 billion people living in it, which was greater than the population of the entire world. So we know that there are many Agadas. Occasionally we do. It's done very cautiously. So this is one of the great arguments. Now another one of the arguments against this Gemara is that there's actually a letter from the great Paisik. I shouldn't say Paisik, but he was known, the Meshech Chachma, the Ar Samech. He was the Gadol Ador, I take back. He was known more as the Gadol Ador than the Paisik. So what does the Ar Samech write? And then we will post it online. He says that after the Balfour Declaration, where the UN voted to allow Israel to return to its homeland, so he said it's not Layalu B'chayma. They're not doing it against the wishes of the world, right? They're doing it with the consent of the world. You're legally authorized to do this. He says even if the shvuos are metaphorical, they're not relevant anymore. And then there are other achrayim, and this was, by the way, the opinion that it's Agada, we will show that the Avnei Nezer took that opinion. Lahalachi says it's an Agada. He says you can't paskin. And there are many others. You have, Reb Shia Lakutna. There are those who wrote wrote a similar thing. There are those who wrote that the third shvua was that they would not make the diaspora. They would not. They would not cause us to suffer in the gullus too much. And the halach is if one side of a treaty breaks apart, then it's batal. So they were mishabed us with the Holocaust, for example, much more midai, and therefore the Gimel Shvuos are not relevant anymore. Now, additionally, the question is, even if the Gimel Shvuos are, okay, that's fantastic. There are the Gimel Shvuos. If you disagree with all of the above, and you say it's not, even if it's nobody paskins the way, even if it's an agadatza, even if they were caused, they destroyed, even if you have to put four things aside. There's another question. I mean, the Jews had nowhere to go. Israel, if there would be no Israel, many, just like the Holocaust proved, many would die. So the question is the Gimel Shvuos? It's true there's a Shvua, but is it Yareg Valyav? Should we die for a Shvua? So the Satmar Rebbe takes, really, I think, quite an interesting step, and he says, yes, they're equivalent of it. Is something that has no halachic basis in the Paiskim is the equivalent of Yareg Valyavar. He bases it on a moral. We will show them, if you go to Maramakail, these are the halachic debates. If you go to the website, which is headlinestorah.com, we will present the Maramakaimos of both sides, and just as an understanding of where he was coming from. But is this the next two conversations will really be about the hashkafic basis more than the halachic basis. So let's go to our guests. We have a fascinating program. Let's start now. We have the great honor of having with us from Eretz Yisroel one of the great mechanchim of our generation. He's the Rosh Yeshiva of Yad Aaron. Rav Volba made him the head of the Vad Chizuk in Eretz Yisroel. He's a Yad Yamin of the Rashke Bahaga, Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman. We would like to welcome Hagoyin Rabbi Yeshua Eisenstein. Welcome, Rabbi Eisenstein.
Hello, good evening.
So, Rabbi Eisenstein, I know that when we talk about the Rashke Bahaga for Rav Steinman, your name is right afterwards as somebody who's like closer to him than just one of the great Mekuravim, certainly one of the only English-speaking Mekuravim. Could you give us a little bit of hashkafa into our attitude towards the Israeli army, towards soldiers, towards the draft, etc.? Give us a little bit of...
I want to first, before we get into this specific topic, I want to just tell over a story from the Chibina Rov. By the Ravai of the Chibina Rov, I was working with my Shver, Rav Zolti, together with Rav Shalom Shvadron. And Rav Shalom Shvadron told over a story from the Chazon Ish with the Chibina Rov. Very interesting story. He said like this: there was once elections in Bnei Brak, and there was a question who to make a coalition with the Mizrahi or with the Mapam. The Mapam was a very leftist party, nearly communist. So they had to make a coalition. There was a question who to make a coalition with the Mizrahi or with the Mapam. So the Chazon Ish sent a shaila to the Chibina Rov through Rav Shalom Shvadron. So the Chibina Rov answered Rav Shalom Shvadron, the shaila of the Chazon Ish. He answered like this: I'm not on the spot. I'm not in Bnei Brak. And for me to answer this question, I have to make a halacha l'deiros, and I don't want to make a halacha l'deiros on this question. And to be on the spot, my answer would be Hayroasho, and Hayroasho I can't make because I'm not on the spot. Now, what did he mean to say? He mean to say like this. Or he came back to the Chazon Ish of Shalom, and the Chazon Ish had gewaltig ano from the what the answer the Chibina Rov. Now, what did the Chibina Rov mean? He meant like this: that if you're on the spot, you're judging a specific question. I know this person from Mizrahi, he might be a very fine person to deal with. I know the person from Mapam, might be a very, very difficult person to deal with. So my judgment here is not a general judgment if Mizrahi is better than Mapam. My judgment here on this specific instant, I say the Mizrahi is better than Mapam, or the opposite. The Mapam, I know the Mapam, and I know he's a very fine person, you could deal with him. And I know the person from Mizrahi, he's not a fine person, you can't deal with him. So I'm saying take a collision with Mapam, not with Mizrahi. That's if I'm on the spot, I know all the little details. If I'm not on the spot, I'm judging this thing in a very general term. What is better, Mizrahi or Mapam? Whatever the reasons go into that. But Shebinov said, I'm not just making a loch of the deus on the shaila. I'm not on the spot. I'm not going to answer. This is a gewaltige limud, this Maisa. If you're not on the spot, you don't know all the little details. All the decisions which go into the Yisroel of Hiro Shah are totally in knowing all the little details of knowing the people that involve all these things. And if you're not on the spot, you can't know all these little details. I think it's a very clear Maisa.
Right. Very powerful story.
Another thing is, there are certain things. First of all, whenever you're talking about Hiro Shah, there's a Drosha Saram that says, the Sanhedrin paskind alocha l'deiros, and the Melech paskind Hiro Shah. And when there is no Melech, the Nosia Sanhedrin, the Godel Ador, has a din of a Melech. So in other words, he's saying, there are certain shaylas that you ask the Sanhedrin, which are all the big Talmidei Chacham of the door, and certain shaylas you have to ask the Godel Ador, which is the Mokum the Melech. Things that are called Hiro Shah are only shaykh to the Godel Ador. Another thing, there's a Sfasemes in the beginning of office that says that there's a certain chelik of Torah which is only nimsa to the Gedolei Ador. This chelik of Torah, the usual, the Kamat, all parts of Torah are nimsa to Kol Klal Yisrael, and there's certain chelik of Torah that are only nimsa to the Gedolei Ador.
Right.
These shaylis of type of the army and so forth are nimsa only to the Gedolei Ador. People that are not the Gedolei Ador can't mix in these shaylis. These are shaylis of Hiro Shah. There's talking the Melech Yisroel, which are the Gedolei Ador.
Rabbi Eisenstein, I'm sort of ignorant. What's the Hiro Shah here? Like, I
when you're
apologize.
When you're talking about a certain chok of Giyus, you're not talking about halacha l'deiros. You have to deal with each instance separately. You have to know who is the government, who are people running it, who is the Sar Bitachon, who are the people in charge of the army. You're dealing with a special situation. You're not dealing with halacha l'deiros and Shulchan Aruch.
Right.
And the whole Anhoga, from the time of the Medina until now, dealing with the Sar Bitachon was always Gedom of Hiro Shah. How you deal with this Sar Bitachon, how you deal with this Rosh Memshala, everything is a different story. And you have to be on the spot to deal with it, and you have to be from the Gedolei Ador that have the Anhoga of this Hiro Shah of Klal Yisrael.
Right. So could you give us some understanding of what the issues are and what the Hiro Shah is? I mean, I don't think there's anybody who understands it better than you.
That I'm not sure of. There's a question of being here. What are the options here? What are the options here? Before there was a chok, all the time the Medina had, there was no chok. The Sar Bitachon gave up Tur. There was never a chok till recently, when the Begat said you have to have a chok.
What does it mean, a chok? I apologize. Like, what does that mean?
Law. There was no
so
law.
What is it? It was just done without any law?
It was done from draft because the Sar Bitachon made such a thing.
There was no law about it. Okay.
There was no law. The Sar Bitachon said we were pattering, we're giving him a dichui.
Right. And now what happened?
Once they came to the Supreme Court, they said you need a law. So then they made Chok Tal. Chok Tal was a certain law which was lasted for 10 years. Then the Supreme Court again took it down.
Okay.
Chok Tal was that when you cut the age of 25, you could go for 1 year to the army, and if you decide not to be in the army, then you don't have to go to the army. You have 1 year. And if you want to go into the army, there was always different ways of making it much easier than a regular army course. That was Chok Tal. Then the Supreme Court said it's not justice. It's not justice because it's being partial to yeshivas.
Favoritism.
Favoritism. Yeah. So then it came Lapid into the government. And then they tried to do things which were very, very big sakona. Then came the new government, and they made this Hesder, which is pretty good.
So
it's the best you could do, And
what is it? What is that? What is the new law? Like what is it? What's the new arrangement?
The new law is that yeshiva students have a dichui like they had all the years. It's not a ptur, it's a dichui. It's a referment. What do you call deferment? And there's a certain quota of amount of people that have to go into the army every year from the Haredi community. They agreed to this because the idea behind it is that anybody that wants to learn does not have to be drafted. It's not learning. It's not going to learn. That's not the point of this. If you want to learn, nobody can be drafted. If you don't want to learn, we're not going to stop you from going to the army.
So what's wrong with that? It sounds...
There's nothing wrong with it. It's not... Nobody's happy about somebody going to the army. But the idea of all the doros since the become of Medina was that somebody that wants to learn cannot be drafted. Torah has to be in the sky by Klal Yisrael. If you go to the army, you can't vaxus a godel b'Torah. You can't vaxus to become a Chochem.
Right.
But somebody that wants to go to the army, you're not going to have to stop him. Now, there's enough that want to go to the army that what they call the amount of people that have to be drafted every year that have to go to the army will definitely be filled.
Right. So I apologize again. I don't understand what changed. Before it was a deferment.
The same thing's a deferment.
So what's the difference?
Now there's a certain amount that every year from the Haredi community will have to go to the army, which will be that anyway. They're going anyway.
But why? But if there's a ptur, why? If there's a deferment, why do they have to go to the army?
If somebody is a real yeshiva student, doesn't have to go to the army. But there's a certain amount that they have to every year has to be go into the army from the Haredi community, with that number anyway.
So what changed? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Nothing really changed. Only that now they say a certain amount of the Haredim have to go to the army, which they go anyway. Even before this law, they were going anyway.
So the only difference is that before they went anyway, and now they're saying there is a certain amount that have to go regardless.
But anyway, they're going to go, and anyway, that number is going to be filled anyway.
Right. So why has this caused so many riots? Explain why people are laying down in the streets and beating up soldiers. I don't get it.
They are afraid that once you give in to the army, you don't know what it'll be in 10 years from now. You know what it'll be in 15 years from now. Which the same thing was always true. Before there was a law, it was always pending on the Sar Bitachon.
So what has created all this unrest? It sounds so minor.
They're claiming that they're giving into the army. You don't know what it'll be in 10 years, and we live only by day here in this country. Nobody knows what will be tomorrow. Morgen mit Mashiach kommen.
Right.
This is the Yisod of Hira Shah. And the Hira Shah, there's no question, this was the right Hira Shah to do this law. And Baruch Hashem, people are learning, and whoever wants to learn is learning, and it's good.
So why are they marching and saying it's Gzeres, it's a Dair Shel Shmad, it's Gzeres Shel Shmad, it's Yerek Val Yaver, I don't get it. Like Yerek Val Yaver, because people go to the army who would anyway go to the army. I don't understand that. Like, explain to me. It just sounds so one-sided. Like, what's the Yerek Val Yaver here?
What's the Horgel Yaver? Because there's a certain amount that have to go to the army. But
they
go to the army anyway.
Well, can I just ask you as an aside? You know, my wife was in Eretz Yisroel just 2 weeks ago, and I have a brother-in-law who lives in Beit Shemesh. So he has a son who's a Hezdernik, goes to a very good yeshiva. He has long payas. He learns Basmada. He's also very Zionistic, and he came home, and he said, "I'm running to Mincha," and his mother started screaming, "You can't go to Mincha in your uniform because they're going to beat you up in Beit Shemesh." And my wife called me, and I said to her, I said, you know, I davened in the same shul in Beit Shemesh near my brother-in-law, and there was a few Notori Karta guys there one year who had just come back from Iran, from marching with Ahmadinejad. So I said, can maybe somebody explain to me the hashkafa where a guy who's marching with Ahmadinejad is davening over there, but somebody who's protecting the borders, which could arguably be a Mohammed mitzvah, is afraid to go to shul. Just explain that, the logic.
See, these people are against the Medina on anything that has anything to do with the Medina. We accept the Medina, what Rabbi Reuven called de facto recognition. They don't accept the Medina, and they think that the army, like, is the worst thing. There's two things. If you talk about something remaining a Shem Torah mitzvahs, going to the army, it's not true. There's a very big sakona.
Even Nachal Haredi, even if they go to Nachal Haredi?
There's sakonas. But it's not because we're against the Medina. See, these people in Torah character are against the Medina. Any serving the army is like saying you serve the Medina. That's not our hashkafa. Our hashkafa is we'd accept the Medina de facto. We don't say going to the army is wrong. We just afraid, first of all, anybody wants to learn. If he goes to the army, will not vaxos in Torah. That's what you want to learn. We're not against the army be'etzim. We recognize the Medina de facto. It's not a question. If you're serving the army, that's a terrible thing. We're afraid of the army because it's very hard to be Shem Torah mitzvahs in the army. There's all types of nisyonis there.
Rabbi Chazi, can I ask you a question? Do they believe that if I personally believe that if the Israeli army left the borders, there would be a shechita like there was in Nazi Germany.
That's
right?
Good.
So what do they believe? Like, if somebody going to the army, David HaMelech had an army, Shlomo HaMelech had an army. They hate us so much, the Arabs. So it's doubtless that there could be you read in your Shemaim and going to the army, not unlike going to college. Once, Rav Hutner used to say, he would say that it used to be that the yeshiva was a mishkan. Today it's a teva. When you leave the walls of the yeshiva, the Kaiser yeshiva, you go to college. These are all dangerous places. But at the end of the day, they would kill us if we didn't protect the borders.
What's the question about it?
So what do they believe? I don't understand that. Do they say also to go to college is Yereg Val Yaver? If you leave yeshiva, it's Yereg Val Yaver? Like, what is the philosophy that is driving this?
They want to separate themselves from the Dina, and they don't want to have any part of it. So, fine. They don't take money from the government. Fine. It's after Hashkofa, fine. But that's not our Hashkofa.
Can I ask you another question?
We accept the Medina de facto. We go to the Knesset, we go to the Bchiras, we do what we can do, we try to rativa, we could rativa, and that's it.
Rabbi Eisenstein, I have a question. I miss this just from somebody not there. The health care in America, it's maybe been a long time since you've been here, but it costs an average family $20,000 a year for Blue Cross or Blue Shield. It's extremely expensive. In Eretz Yisroel, it was rated by Bloomberg as the fourth best medical care in the world, and it's given for free, which means that
not for free, but very, very cheap.
Yeah, which means all these Notori Kartaniks and all these people who are saying it's Gzeirish Shmad and they're the worst imaginable and etc. and they're lying down. When they have babies, do they go to the local hospital? Do they take the medical care that's so highly subsidized from the Medina, or do they say no? We don't want to take from them anything, and we pay our doctors out of pocket.
What do you think?
I'm saying, so isn't that so